Good morning. It's Friday, September 26th. The multi-front war in the Middle East is now 721 days old. I'm your host, Jonathan Schanzer. Welcome back yet again to the FDD Morning Brief. Some big news developing stories this morning. Let me tick through a few of them. Microsoft is reportedly blocking some Israeli accounts because of reported violations of terms of service relating to Palestinians. We're digging into that now and hoping to learn more. The Israeli Air Force reportedly took out a missile factory in eastern Lebanon in recent hours. Hezbollah keeps trying to get back on its feet. The Israelis are not having any of it. Donald Trump says no to Israeli annexation of the West Bank. If you ask me, I don't think Prime Minister Netanyahu is upset about that at all, but I do think he's trying to use the threat of annexation as a way to get the Muslim world to finally chip in and end the war in Gaza. In the meantime, big booms yesterday in and around Sana'a, the capital of Yemen. The Israelis responded with overwhelming force after the Houthis fired off a slow and low-flying drone that evaded Israeli missile defenses on Wednesday. In short order, a bunch of strategic targets were lit up across Sana'a. It's a sign that Israel has better intelligence on Yemen, but none of this is going to stop until they get Abdul Malik al-Houthi, the longstanding leader of the Houthi movement. He's undoubtedly hiding under a bunker somewhere, and I'm not much of a gambling man, but I'd put money on the tech wizards of Startup Nation figuring out where he is and eliminating him soon. Today's guest is Henri Barkey. He's an adjunct senior fellow for Middle Eastern Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations and the Bernard L. and Bertha F. Cohen Chair in International Relations at Lehigh University. He's now a repeat offender here on the FDD Morning Brief. We're going to have him on the program shortly to talk about Turkey, Syria, and the drama this week at the United Nations, not to mention the White House. We'll be serving up that live interview in just a few minutes, so hang tight for that. Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas had himself one hell of a week. The Trump administration banned him from attending the anti-Israel fest in New York, but don't shed a tear for Abu Mazen, the 89-year-old Palestinian president who is now 20 years into his 4-year term, still took to the video screen and accused Israel of genocide. He then watched from Ramallah as successive countries recognized the kleptocratic government he's controlled since taking power back in 2005. I've said it before. I'll say it again. There's nothing wrong with Palestinian nationalism. People seeking statehood is a natural thing, and it should be embraced, but with a few caveats. First, there should be a monopoly on arms. The Palestinians have the exact opposite. Armed groups run amok in both the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Second, there needs to be a competent government. That's a hard no in Gaza, where Hamas has ruled, but also not happening in the West Bank, where Abbas and his cronies have grown filthy rich off the generosity of the donor community. Third, there should be defined borders. That could have happened back in 2000 when Bill Clinton offered a land for peace deal that would have ended the conflict. Yasser Arafat, the Palestinian leader at the time, launched an intifada instead, and he plunged the region into a war that, upon reflection, may never really have ended. Palestine is now recognized by more than 140 countries. Go figure. Abu Mazen may be over the hill, but he's outplayed everyone, his opponents and the useful idiots alike. Now for your headlines. Headline 1, Italy and Spain deployed naval ships to escort the flotilla attempting to break Israel's blockade on Gaza. In case you missed it, there's a flotilla of exactly 50 civilian boats en route to Gaza to break Israel's naval blockade. Swedish environmentalist, otherwise known as the Swedish meatball, Greta Thunberg, is once again among the sailors. As of yesterday morning, the flotilla was sailing through Greek waters after reportedly experiencing moderate drone activity overnight. That's a quote from the flotilla folks. That was when Italy decided to send a pair of naval vessels to accompany the flotilla to Gaza, and then Spain announced it would do the same. So here's where I need to stop and remind you. Italy and Spain have done exactly zero to get the hostages back. Italy and Spain have done nothing to restrain the Houthis or Hezbollah. They've done nothing to demand an end to Iran's nuclear program. But now, after nearly 2 years of war and misery, Italy and Spain have thrown their lot with, wait for it, Hamas. And no, don't tell me this flotilla will benefit the people of Gaza. The aid will get hijacked. It always does. Headline 2, Iran says it it obtained a trove of documents about sensitive Israeli sites and nuclear facilities. Iran's intelligence ministry aired a segment about the documents on television. Intelligence Minister Ismail Khatib said that Tehran has identified 189 Israeli scientists and related officials, while claiming that Israeli citizens continue to collaborate with the Islamic Republic for money. Some of the documents suggest nuclear cooperation between Israel and France. Of course, we know the French helped to build Israel's nuclear program back in the 1950s, so stop the presses. Other documents offer a glimpse into the private life of Director General Rafael Grossi of the International Atomic Energy Agency. With that, I suppose the regime is trying to convey that Israel has eyes on everyone, even the chief of the UN nuclear watchdog. I mean, go figure, you'd think that they would be looking. Anyway, it doesn't all seem to add up to much right now, but we're going to continue to watch this space. And intelligence and information war is undeniably heating up. And headline 3, Russia and Iran signed a memorandum of understanding for the construction of nuclear power plants in Iran. I mean, what could possibly go wrong, right? The agreement is with Russia's state nuclear company, Rosatom. The company described the agreement as a, quote, strategic project, end quote. Rosatom's chief and Iranian Vice President Mohammad Islami signed the agreement on Wednesday. Islami is also Iran's top nuclear official. Earlier this week, he told Iranian state media that the plan is for Rosatom to build 8 nuclear plants across Iran. The project will help boost Iran's nuclear capacity by 2040. In the meantime, the regime's supreme leader continues to insist that uranium enrichment is a national imperative, and that will come at a cost. Tomorrow, we expect the UN to allow for those nuclear sanctions to snap back on Iran. Thank you, and more, please. All right, it's time to welcome Henri Barkey onto the show. Without further ado, let's dive right in. Welcome to the FDD Morning Brief, Henri Barkey.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, you're a Turkey expert, and we need you to help us understand the U.S. tour of Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Let's start with what he said at the UN. He always says that the world is more than 5, meaning there should be an expanded Security Council. He needs more than the 5 countries that currently dominate that Security Council. Did he make any headway there? Of course, the answer is no, but perhaps more realistically, did he accomplish anything at Turtle Bay?
Well, I mean, this time around, he probably achieved a little bit more in the sense that he's been trying to become the chief supporter of the Palestinians in Gaza and accusing Israel of genocide. And so, I mean, and this is a theme that he essentially focused on the most. I mean, that was his main intention, and whether or not that made any headway, I don't know. But the truth is that I think at UN at least, all the positions in terms of who's who, etc., is quite fixed. It's not that Erdogan went up a few steps on the ladder of importance. I think, but it is an important show for his domestic audience. I mean, and look, all politics is ultimately domestic, and he's playing it to his own domestic audience.
Absolutely, and I think his people were watching. But okay, let's talk about that sidebar that he had with Donald Trump and the leaders of UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Qatar, and Pakistan. He seemed to play a pretty prominent role there. I mean, he was seated next to Trump. I'm sure his people back home were watching that and cheering. But was anything actually accomplished in that meeting based on what you've heard?
Well, look, it's very difficult to figure out if anything was accomplished, especially in meetings such as that one with so many leaders around, and also with somebody like Trump at the helm. It's almost, we should not expect much, right? I mean, yes, he was sitting next to Trump, and it gives him a little bit more importance, if you want. But I don't think a Saudi leader was there. Obviously, if MBS was there, probably MBS would be sitting next to Trump. But anyway, so I don't think that was such an important meeting.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, although I do get a sense that maybe Trump has kind of made some kind of a deal with these countries that, if Israel doesn't annex parts of the West Bank, then maybe there's a way forward for them to help clear the way with Hamas and to return hostages, although I guess we're going to have to wait and see.
Right.
But all right, I want to talk about the visit to the White House. Here, Erdogan had a clear agenda. There are some mistakes that he's made in the past, and he's trying to undo them. If you would, maybe just remind our audience here, what were those mistakes, and has he fixed any of them now that he's gone to the White House?
Well, first of all, it's important to note that this is Erdogan's first visit at the White House in 6 years. Last time he came to the White House, it was to see again President Erdogan during his first term, and the Biden administration gave him a real cold shoulders during. Erdogan was desperate to get invited to the White House, and the Biden administration decided not to invite him, and for very good reasons. I mean, what Erdogan is doing at home in terms of jailing his opponents, going after the opposition political parties, was too much for the Biden administration to stomach. So they essentially dissed him. But it's very clear that Trump has a very different approach to Erdogan. He doesn't really care whether Erdogan jails his opponents. And let's face it, I mean, the mayor of Istanbul, the single most important Turkish opposition politician, the one who's likely to run against Erdogan in a future presidential election, if there is one, was jailed on March 19th, essentially 2 months after President Trump took office, and not a peep came out of the White House. And since then, more and more and more politicians have been jailed. Again, there has been no criticism on the part of the United States. And this is really very disturbing because in all of these instances, the charges are make-believe charges. And you see almost, if you want, a sense of that the two leaders are two peas in the same people, in that Trump is going after his enemies, Erdogan is going after his enemies. So in that sense, there is some mutual understanding, if you want. But what is interesting also is that President Trump's Middle East envoy, Barak, who's both the ambassador to Turkey, to Ankara, although he lives in Istanbul, and also is the Syrian negotiator, gave an interesting interview the other day in which he said that Trump told him that what Erdogan needs is respect and legitimacy, and that their job should be to give Erdogan legitimacy. And in a way, they were right. I mean, Erdogan, by coming to the White House, by being well received, and they basically did not talk about major points of disagreements. Erdogan got what he wanted, and in that sense, Trump was right on the money. I mean, Erdogan is seeking respectability and legitimacy, and even if it's Donald Trump, who is, by the way, really not liked in Turkey, obviously, for a whole variety of reasons, including Gaza. And I don't understand why that gives him more legitimacy, but Erdogan clearly wanted it and got it.
So I want to just circle back on two files that I think are still open and are problematic for Erdogan. I think they're probably the right files to keep open from a U.S. perspective. The first is the F-35. So if you could touch on that for just a minute. The other one is Hulk Bank. That came up yesterday too, at least as I understand it, it was a topic that was being discussed. So there are two files that are open that are bothering Erdogan that, at least as I understand it, didn't get addressed. Want to explain those for just a minute?
Yes, the United States kicked Turkey out of the F-35 program some years ago, actually during the first Trump administration, because the Turks decided to buy the Russian S-400 missile systems, air defense system. And the concern in the United States at the time was, even though, again, Trump was very pro-Erdogan then, concern was that the S-400s would relay some of the very well-kept secrets of the F-35 to the Russians, because this was a Russian system, and the Russians probably put in all kinds of systems in there that would probably capture F-35 secrets, because the two would have to be coordinated once in the same country. The Turks were told many, many times not to buy the S-400s, and yet they went ahead and bought them. So the United States did not have much of a choice. It imposed CAATSA sanctions, as well as kicked the Turks out of the F-35. The thing to remember about the F-35 program was it was a major deal for the Turks, because the Turks were not only buying them, but they were going to be part of the production process, which meant that there would be a huge amount of technology transfer. The Turks would make money from producing parts for the F-35, and they had been promised to be the center for the F-35s, which are based in Eastern European countries, to come and be serviced in Turkey. So it will be essentially the service point for all the F-35s in Eastern Europe. Right? The Turks gave all that away by insisting on buying the S-400s. They didn't expect the Americans to do this. And then they got shocked. But the S-400s, even though they have not been deployed in Turkey, remain there. And that, until the Turks get rid of the S-400 somehow, I don't see, even though the president said, well, we'll find a solution to it, they will not find a solution. So the trick is for the Turks to get rid of the S-400s. The Halkbank case is sanctions on the bank for doing illegal stuff, but that was brought up not because it's bothering Erdogan, but rather as a tit for tat. He thinks that Americans want the Greek economical patriarch wants to open a school in an island of Istanbul where priests had been trained for maybe hundreds of years. That school was closed in 1971 by the Turks in response to the crisis in Cyprus. And it has been a sore point for the Greek American community and also for the US government. So what I see in terms of analysis in Turkey, at least, is that maybe he asked about the sanctions on Halkbank to be lifted, and therefore then he will open up this the school for the Greek Orthodox community. It's not as significant as one would think.
Everything's a quid pro quo with this guy. It's really it's amazing when you think about it.
But look, it's what you say. For both leaders, it's a question of exchange. I mean, they both think of the way they both approach their relationship as an exchange. You'll give me this, I'll give you that. Part of the deal, which was not really immediately announced, that I was surprised, was that the Turks would buy Boeing aircraft. So they did promise to buy 50 878s, and with an option to buy another 25, and then also a number of 737s. But these can be changed, of course, right? And the Turks are also going to come under pressure from the Europeans to buy Airbus. So, but this is all the deals that are being cooked behind the scenes, and none of them were actually effected yesterday. I mean, there's a promise to lift the sanctions, the F-35, etc.
Yeah. Just a reminder, the Halkbank, that stems from a massive sanctions evasion scheme that the Turks carried out on behalf of Iran. At the height of the nuclear program, they were bringing money and gold into Iran in clear violation of U.S. sanctions. That's what they're getting hammered for right now. There's a Supreme Court case that is lingering. But yeah, I don't think that that Erdogan tackled either one of those in a clear way, F-35 or Halkbank. So those things continue to be a drag on U.S.-Turkey relations. But I think you're right that the transactional relationship continues. It is not a transformational one. It is not something that is based in shared values or shared understanding of the world. It's what are you going to give me? what am I giving you? And that really is the way that things seem to be shaping up. But I want to talk for just a minute just about Syria. This is a Turkish sancak, if you will, at this point, right? This is an area that is dominated. It's not even really fully a state yet, but it's a territory, a leadership, a government seems to be dominated by Turkey. And you had this guy, Ahmed al-Shara. He had his big day. Do we have any clarity from your perspective? I mean, there are two questions here, whether he's a moderate, a pragmatic Islamist, a radical Islamist. Seems to have played everything down the middle. But I mean, first, I want to hear what you think about how he performed. But I also want to note that the Syrian leader was wheeling and dealing at the UN, recognition of Ukraine, talk about a deal with Israel on security, possible more trade with Turkey. What do you make of these moves? And I mean, I guess bottom line, what do you make of Shara and the new Syria? Is it the new Syria?
Well, look, this is the era of transactional relationships. And Shara has understood that if you want to get anywhere, you make deals, whether it's a deal with Israel, if it's a deal on Ukraine, deals with Turkey. But what's interesting is that, let me say one thing about Shara. I don't particularly think that Shara has really changed his colors. I mean, you don't become an Islamist, a really radical Islamist, and change overnight. You can change. I'm not saying you can't change, and maybe he is changing, but some of the things he's implemented, especially the kind of people he has hired to serve with him, are really hardcore Islamists. He has not really made an overture to the other groups in society. But one thing came out that did not come out yesterday is that Erdogan wanted to talk about the Kurds in Syria. It doesn't look like he came up, or at least that the United States did not say that they would be pulling their troops out. On the contrary, Trump said, Syria is going through a crisis. We have to be there for them, and so on and so forth. So I don't necessarily think that there was a deal on Syria. And that probably was a disappointment for Erdogan. They may have told him, look, let things move along, and then maybe in 6 months or a year, we'll look at the policy once again. But that's it. But by the way, the one surprise for Erdogan was Trump's insistence that Turkey should stop buying oil and gas from Russia. Turkey is like Europe before the crisis, and Europe moved quite a bit in the other direction, was completely dependent on Russian imports for oil and gas. 65 to 70% of all energy imports come from Russia. And therefore, Trump said, you have to stop buying Russian oil and gas. And that probably came a little bit as a shock, because I don't think people expected that.
Well, that's a good thing, I think. Right. We're going to have to leave it there. Running out of time. I want to thank you, Henri Barkey, for joining us today on the FDD Morning Brief.
Thank you.
All right. Here's what FDD has on tap for you today. FDD's Elaine Dezensky and Josh Birnbaum published a piece in the National Interest sounding the alarm about China's domination of the global battery supply chain. Lithium batteries are the beating heart of technologies we use every day, and China makes a whopping 80% of the world's supply. Elaine and Josh urged the Trump administration, Congress, and the private sector to mobilize, break China's supply chain chokehold, and regain battery and critical mineral independence. Sounds like a tough challenge, but it also sounds good to me. In The Spectator, FDD's newest senior fellow, Edmund Fitton Brown, reflects on the sorry state of the UN General Assembly, otherwise known affectionately as UNGA. Edmund cuts through the noise to point out that UNGA is rotten to its core, and its Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, is a major part of the problem. Guterres is more concerned about appeasing the jackals at the UN than delivering results, and the recent push to recognize a state of Palestine is a case in point. Finally, check out FDD founder and president Cliff May's latest column in Washington Times, reminding his readers that Qatar is no Switzerland. The Emirate is a longtime sponsor of Hamas and a whole bunch of other jihadi groups, not to mention the ATM for the Muslim Brotherhood. Just as the U.S. had a right to target Osama bin Laden in Pakistan, so too did the Israelis have a right to target Hamas leaders in Doha. Cliff argues that President Trump, if he were to learn, or rather to lean on Qatar to pressure Hamas, we might actually see some progress on the Gaza file. Cliff is 1,000% right, as usual. All right. It's time to wrap this thing up like a Chipotle burrito, folks. If you're craving more brainy content, check out the expert analysis on our website, FDD.org. Read our quick takes on X, or watch the videos we post on Instagram and YouTube. And yes, you can still make that generous tax-deductible donation at FDD.org/invest. I'm going to apologize for my ill health, still coughing a little bit, getting over a cold. But I promise to be better by Monday, when we will have another episode of your favorite morning show. Until then, I'm Jonathan Schanzer, signing off for FDD.